Right now, we are going to meet our brand new fire chief. He's been on the job less than 3 weeks officially, but a lot of you in the community may know of Brian Sturdivant. Chief Sturdivant, nice to have you with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Tim. Thank you for having me.
It's got to feel a little weird. You came back, you were sworn in October 2nd as police chief, and you grew up in this town.
Yes.
That was a couple years ago.
Yes.
So tell us about your background, in Battle Creek, when you were just a little tyke.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I was born and raised here in Battle Creek and grew up at 366 North Washington, right next to the Claude Evans Park, prior to the park being constructed.
Oh, yeah.
Had a lot of fond memories of growing up in the community, playing Little League Baseball at Bailey Park, the Kellogg tours, visiting the zoo, and just a great childhood, if you will. And after I graduated from junior high school, which was W.K. Kellogg Junior High School, the family and I moved to Kalamazoo because at the time my dad was going to night school at Western, and the commute, of course, back then was a little different than it is today, and it was a bit of an issue for him. So we moved to Kalamazoo right as I entered high school.
It looked like you could still play baseball out there.
I try. These bones have a little age and some mileage on them, but I do take a lot of time to try to take care of my body as best I can.
Well, you lead by example, and I know that police work, fire work, you need to stay in shape. Obviously, would you say fireworks is even more important?
I would say from a physical standpoint, that's absolutely correct. There's been some recent studies that have compared active firefighting to active activity at the pro athlete level.
Sure.
So we place a high priority on physical fitness, endurance, flexibility, cardiovascular health, things of that nature. So it is very, very important in our line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've been doing this kind of work, fire work, for what, 30 years or more?
Yes, it's been a little over 30 years. I left Kalamazoo a couple years after graduating from high school, joined the military, did a stint in the U.S. Air Force as one enlistment. Once I got discharged from the military, I relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, and that's where I began my fire service career. This was late 80s, and been going strong ever since.
And what, you were able to do a lot of schooling as a result of your military service?
Well, actually, I didn't begin the formal education piece until I transitioned from the military into the fire service. And when I was there in Atlanta, I was able to obtain a 2-year degree. I transitioned to Arizona, where I was able to complete my studies for my undergraduate degree. I left Arizona, transitioned to California, entered grad school, and was able to graduate with my master's degree. And then in between, there was quite a bit of professional development and rank-specific training that I was able to employ. So I consider myself a lifelong learner, still learning as we speak, talking and meeting with our firefighters, and every day is a great opportunity to learn and train, and that's what I take advantage of.
What do you remember about your first job in fire protection?
Well, I remember that this was back in the day before a lot of the current National Fire Protection Agency mandates were in place, and we used to ride on the back of the tailboard of the truck. We used to hide under the hose cover to stay out of the weather. We had SCBA that were not positive pressure, so if you didn't inhale, you didn't receive the oxygenated air in the tanks. And so technology has brought us a long way since those early days.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. It's got to have changed a lot, the way that you fight fires and the way that you run departments and all of that kind of stuff because of technology. And then again, it kind of goes back to the athleticism part of it too. Probably a lot of it hasn't changed.
That's absolutely correct. There's still a huge physical component to actually fighting fire and the rescue special operation type incidents that we engage. but technology has brought us a very long way. And the modern fire departments now really model the public sector from a business standpoint. And we focus on budgeting, we focus on soft skill development, we focus on keeping our members engaged and providing them with opportunities to employ some of their thinking from a collaborative standpoint. And again, fighting fire, responding to the emergency calls typically only end up being about 15% of what we actually do. So 80 to 85% of what we do on a day-to-day basis is the people stuff, if you will. Just engaging with one another, training our members. They live in the firehouses, and just that whole family brotherhood is very, very big in our industry.
Yeah, and if you can prevent fires from happening, then you guys can just play cards and see the insurance rates in the community go down. In fact, my agent said, "Hey, your rates dropping." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, they just hired Chief Brian Sturdivant, so we got to drop your rates."
That's a great point, Tim. That's a great point. The biggest component of our job is prevention. And what we can prevent, it actually allows us to focus some attention in some other areas. And as you mentioned, insurance ratings, I will be looking to address our insurance services office, which is our ISO rating here in this community. If we can get that lowered going through the components of the criteria with that governing body, it will save on premium dollars for not only our residential members, but also for our commercial members within the community.
Yeah, very important. And just like another part of trying to build the community up and make it more attractive for business to come here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's huge for the business community. There are a lot of very interesting economic development projects coming out of City Hall right now. And whatever the fire department can do to enhance those projects, that's what we're going to be looking to do.
Yep. We've come a long way in that area. Back the turn of the last century, it was a little different when the Firekeepers Casino bought the old fire station on Kendall and converted it to a restaurant, the Firekeepers Fire Hall.
Yes.
We were talking about the origin of that radio, or that fire station, and Advanced Thresher was right across the street where the Public Works building is now.
Yes.
And they wanted a fire station across the street from their plant in case they had a fire. They wanted it right there, so they paid to have it.
Yes, yes.
And there were a few fire stations in town that are a result of manufacturers footing the bill.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do it that way anymore now. We've got a city government that takes care of that.
Yes, yes.
We were talking with Battle Creek Fire Chief Brian Sturdivant, and we went without a chief for a while there. Chief Blocker was kind of overseeing things for several months, but we're glad to have you on board. And one of the main reasons I think they chose you, Chief Sturdivant, was because you actually, even though it's been a while, you were born and raised here and part of this community. You know the town. You probably know the streets. Did it come back to you pretty quick?
It actually did. I've visited quite a bit since I've been away. I left Michigan in 1980 and returned about a month ago. But I've always been back and forth because my parents were there in Kalamazoo. Mm-hmm. I've got aunts, uncles, cousins here in Battle Creek. So the community, as different as it looks now, 30 years later, there's still a very familiar feel to the area. So I feel very, very comfortable.
How many people work under you in the Battle Creek Fire Department?
Right now we have about 90 personnel. About 80 of those are actually assigned to firehouses on a 24-hour on, 48-hour off work schedule. And we have about 8 or 9 folks that actually work the 40-hour work week, Monday through Friday. And that's typically our administrative staff, and we stay very, very connected to City Hall. But the emergency response capability from the fire department is managed out of the firehouses. We actually have 7 of them, 6 of them in the city and 1 of them out at the airport. And they're staffed 24/7, 365.
So our firefighters, they're on 24 hours and they're off 48?
Yes, sir.
That's got to be odd. But obviously it works and it's been tested. And is that the best way to do it?
Well, that's typical in the fire service right now. Our folks report at 8 a.m. in the morning, and they will stay on duty that 24-hour period until 8 a.m. the next morning, and we actually have 3 shifts. There have been some very interesting models on the West Coast where through labor negotiations, some of the fire departments are actually working 48 hours on, 96 hours off. And a lot of that is due to the fact that a lot of the firefighters just cannot afford to live in the communities that they serve because of the price of real estate on the West Coast. So they work 2 days on and have the 96 hours off. And there have been some discussions as it relates to 8-hour workday for firefighters. You'll have a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift, a 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. And there's been discussions about removing the beds out of the stations, replacing the beds with workstations as it relates to computers and administrative capabilities, and just managing from 8-hour shift workday. But again, that's a negotiating situation with the labor organizations, and I'm not really sure that that would really float. There have been discussions, but I have yet to see a fire department transition to that work schedule.
Well, some of these things get entrenched, you know. It's the way we've always done it,
Right.
and you get used to it. I mean,
Yes.
it's like any shift. Even I remember working third shift. It took me a while. You
Right.
get used to it. You make adjustments, and then you build your life around that. And then somebody comes along, changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I could see where that might not be too popular.
Right.
Speaking about not too popular, I don't want to open a big can of worms here, but you know, a lot of communities go to a public safety sort of thing where they ask policemen and firefighters to do the same job. Have you ever worked in a department that does that?
I have not, but spending quite a bit of time growing up in Kalamazoo, I'm very, very familiar with that model. I was a previous fire chief in Milpitas, California, outside of San Jose, and one of my neighboring cities utilized that public safety model in Sunnyvale, California. My current local IAFF, Local 335, they ran some numbers and conducted some studies, and it is a bit of an expensive model, but it does seem to work for the communities that deploy that model. Speaking with leadership at City Hall currently, don't believe that there's an interest in Battle Creek transitioning to that model as of right now.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody who thought that that would be a good thing for our community.
Right, right.
And I think there's an idea that, you know what, it's not, neither job is easy. We ought to have specialists that really can do one job and focus on it.
Right.
Because you're asking people to do an awful lot.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. The big focus for me would be the mental health component. Our firefighters, they are just some great folks that are really in the business because of the passion to serve. And we come across and see quite a bit. And post-traumatic stress disorder, critical incident stress management, those are at the top of my priority list to make sure that the mental health capabilities of our members are intact. Because if they are, they tend to be able to provide a greater degree, a higher level of service to the community. And when you talk about combining police services with fire services, you almost double, if not triple, some of that mental health impact. And that can be dangerous. We have to be very, very careful. Right now, suicide in the fire service, suicide in public safety is at an all-time high.
Wow.
And we have to have programs and processes in place that allow our members to offload what they see and deal with on a day-to-day basis. We have to remember that 911 is dialed when someone is having probably the worst day of their life. And it's only so much of that the human body and mind can absorb. So we have to have programs that support. So I would be very, very cautious as it relates to that public safety model and those mental health impacts. It just cannot be minimized.
We talked a little about technology, and new tools that you have. One of those is the fire retardants that have been in the news now, suspected to cause some possible groundwater pollution, the PFAS.
Yes.
Do we use that type of fire retardant at all?
Right now, we have in the past, and currently in the city of Battle Creek, we are in the process of transitioning to a more environmental friendly foam capability and decommissioning all of the current foam that we have in place that contains the PFAS. A vendor, from what I understand, a vendor has been selected. And right now, there's just the process of tying the ribbon on the whole contractual piece so that we can begin taking delivery and slowly phasing out and decommissioning some of the foam that we have in place right now that contains those chemicals.
And meanwhile, we've heard stories that a lot of departments are just ceasing the training with that type of foam and just having it on hand for emergencies.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of that model. I'm very, very pleased that the city is moving forward with removing it altogether. The application of foam has become huge as it relates to structural firefighting. After the major body of the fire is knocked down with water, we typically will come behind that and deploy foam to suppress the hot spots and to ensure that there is no rekindle. So with the city of Battle Creek taking a proactive stance to remove it altogether, that definitely is the best model for our community.
How many fires do we have caused now by people making illegal drugs? Meth labs and the Village Inn Apartments fire. That was somebody making hash oil.
Yeah, it's a big problem, coast to coast, border to border. I have worked in quite a few different departments within my career, and it has been a problem. A lot of it has to do with just public education to ensure that we flood the community with information so that the level of suspicious reporting can assist us with being proactive with what that level of chemical fire would look like. But they are very, very prevalent in this day and age.
Certainly telltale signs if your neighbor's doing that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. There's certain odors, if you will. There are certain drains on the electrical grid, and there are things that spike that let you know that there is something suspicious going on, and we have to kind of pay a little closer attention to that and have a reporting mechanism in place to provide us with assistance in those areas.
Odd-looking things in the trash dumpster.
Oh yeah.
And,
oh yeah.
We'll probably have to have you back to talk about some of that and
Yes.
Other aspects to firefighting in Battle Creek. But Chief Brian Sturdivant, welcome to Battle Creek. Welcome back to Battle Creek.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to have you in here this morning. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.